All right, with the Course Codes and Assessment Polls webinar. Again, thank you for your patience as we've gotten started. In the room here with me today, we have Mary Badawala, the Assistant Commissioner of Assessment Accountability and Data Governance, Keith Cornelius with Assessment Logistics, myself, Mark Jackson with Assessment Logistics, and Melissa Teat with the EIS Help Desk, and Anna Defer with Communications. The things that we're going to be going over in this next hour include the short overview of SIS to EIS. We're going to talk about some visibility tool updates and working with the visibility tool. We're going to talk about paper testing and then specifically about course codes, EOC, the Cambridge codes, grades 3 through 8 general ed, grades 2 through 8 comprehensive codes, grade 2 codes, MSAA and TCAP alternate codes. We'll also talk a little bit about duplicate course codes and about special situations such as alternative schools, homebound, homeschools, and even some other situations. Finally, we want to give you a couple of important reminders about assessment, and then we'll go ahead and take some of your questions. We'll be doing the questions via chat rather than audio. So let's go ahead and get started at this point. If you have questions, you're welcome to save them to the end because I'm not going to be able to break in real easily in the process of the presentation. But we'll be here and we'll be happy to answer the questions for you. So let's start with SIS to EIS. Remember, it all goes back to the SIS, your Student Information System. That feeds EIS, and EIS then feeds 3 different platforms. The visibility tool, which gives you the ability to review your data, to check demographic statistics. The visibility tool is a window into EIS that shows you what will be pulled for assessment. Secondly, the EIS feeds Nextera. That is Questar's platform, the Nextera test delivery system. That's where we do order entry, for example, for Braille and large print. It's where we do the test administration and where you'll put your report of irregularity. Finally, it also feeds EdTools. And EdTools now is primarily used for teacher-student connection. So notice, Nextera and EdTools are not connected to each other. All of them are connected to EIS, which is the source of truth for assessment information. Then some revised timelines. Wednesday, February 7th, which is today, is the deadline for grade 5 through 8 opt-in for online testing. It's also the deadline for grades 3 through 8 large print and Braille orders. And as soon as we get off the phone, if you want to jump back in onto Nextera where all of that takes place, under enrollment, you're going to go ahead and mark your online or paper for grades 5 through 8, and it's where you're going to put large print and Braille orders for grades 3 through 8. February 15th is the deadline that we're going to use to confirm individual student enrollment data. That's the data that's used on pre-ID labels, which means you have approximately a week and a half to get all of that information in and cleaned up, and we appreciate the hard work that you're already doing on that. Finally, there's the deadline that's way out in the future, which is Friday, May 4th, the last day of the test window, is the deadline to confirm student demographic data. That is all of the detailed data. Remember, pre-ID only has a small number of fields to it. It has first and last name, it has the content area, it has the student grade, the student date of birth, and the student gender, and their USID. The rest of their demographic data will then be completed and confirmed by May 4th. Obviously, the quicker you get that done, the better off you are. Deadline also for you as a district and schools to complete teacher-student connection is Friday, May 4th, the last day of the testing window. You will not be able to make changes to demographic data or to the testing or to teacher-student connection after May 4th. So the last EIS assessment poll that we'll be using to provision Nextera with currently enrolled students and class rosters will be 2 business days before the testing window opens. In the fall, we actually went a little earlier than that, but this spring what we're looking at is Wednesday, April 11th. And at that point, then everybody will be locked in for you to go ahead and do any kind of moving of classes that you need to do in Nextera. Final EIS transfer for demographic data is to generate demographic data for the comprehensive data files, what we talked about just a few minutes ago on that revised place, and that's the big letters, Friday, May 4th, 2018. You must make sure that all demographic changes are corrected by the last day of the testing window because no changes will be accepted after the window closes. So I've been reminded of two things. First, that assessment polls provision Nextera is for online testing, which is why I rolled back. The information here about demographic data is for both paper and online, whether you are testing the students in Nextera test delivery system or if you are testing them paper pencil. So let's take a minute and talk about the visibility tool. So a quick roll-up that gives you visibility into any issues that might prevent students from being registered for testing ahead of time. We're going to talk in a little more detail in a minute, but I want to note on the right-hand side of this slide, this shows you how you can access the visibility tool. If you have EIS production, you already have permission to that. If you do not currently have access to this tool and require it, then you need to fill out an application access form. It's available on the LiveBinders site that assessment uses. It's also available on the Department of Ed Education Information System, or EIS, webpage. And then that information is submitted to the EIS Help Desk. So let's talk about how you're going to get some more information out of the visibility tool. One of the things you're going to see is that possibly on your page you may have a high priority metric group in red. That means there's some kind of problem. As you can see here, there's a number of problems for the district that I chose to pick on. We will leave them nameless. So if you want to know something more specific about those information, I can click on that small question mark you can see to the left of the information, right there where the arrow is pointing. And then that will pull up something that looks like this, which gives metric value information. In this case, these students that are currently registered in 2 different districts or schools, they gave me their state student ID so that I could look them up. I blacked that out for you since you don't need somebody else's USID. But this is the way that you're going to be able to use this information on those main demographic pages to look behind some of that problem information to find out what the issue is, whether it is a teacher license number or whether it is a local class number or whether it is a student USID. There's also some new ways to sort that were released last week into the visibility tool. Fall refers to fall EOC testing. Spring refers to spring EOC testing, and then you have it broken into grade bands of grade 2, grade 3 through 4, grade 5 through 8, and then 2 other areas. The kindergarten inventory, which is something that is coming towards you over the next few months, and alt assessment. You notice that the thing you choose is the year, which is defaulted. The first choice that you'll make then is the testing window, and at this testing window you have all of these options to work with, and you can drill down from there. If you have a data issue, the first tier you're going to use to deal with it is to use the visibility tool and EIS error logs to check why is there a problem, why isn't something showing up in EIS. After you've checked those 2 resources and you can't find an explanation, then you can go to the next step. The second step is to work with your SIS vendor to make sure that you have an accurate and complete SIS load file. And the final step in this process, then the third tier, is to contact Melissa and the other folks at the EIS Help Desk. It's important that you've done your due diligence before you contact them. They are fantastic folks, but we are limited. We only have so many of them. We want to make sure that all of you guys are taken care of. If it's possible, submit support requests to the EIS Help Desk through your District Technology Support portal. If you have the single sign-on, that's what SSO means, Orion Dashboard, you can log in there. If you're not able to use the portal, the email address of eis.help@tn.gov or the phone number listed there for District Technology Help Desk, both of those will help you get to the right place. So let's talk about some common data quality issues that show up. First, I want to make sure that all teachers have first and last names, that their email address is entered and valid, that it contains an @ symbol, and the appropriate domain.com. I know we cleared up the majority of these in the fall, but still, if you've got teachers that are using an email address which is not using one of your whitelisted addresses for your district, that could be causing the problem of why you're not seeing classes and or a teacher show up in the visibility tool. You need to make sure that that teacher license number, or TLN, is entered and is valid, and as well that the teacher class assignments are complete, that there's no missing or empty from and to date values, and that the date values are entered according to an appropriate and consistent date format. Inside that, you have to think about that there's no inappropriate date overlaps between multiple teachers, so that you leave only one teacher as the teacher of record for any given class. In order to mark a teacher as inactive, that staff assignment end date for the class has to be on or before the teacher's start date, the new teacher's start date as the teacher of record. There's also some common issues that show up with classes. First, you have to use valid and approved course codes for assessment to provision students. If you're unsure about that, look at the course codes document, which is available to you on LiveBinders, on EdTools, and on the Nextera admin. It will also go over some of those here later during this presentation. So in order to be a valid class for testing, the class must have a teacher of record assigned, and that teacher has to have a valid teacher license number and a valid work email address. And there can only be one active teacher of record assigned to the class. As well, with students, there's some issues. The student has to have a first name, a last name, a date of birth, district, school, and a grade value. Their from and to dates have to be complete with no missing or empty date values, and they have to be in a consistent format. Student class assignments have to be complete. In other words, they are not an active student if they don't have a class assignment, and they have to be appropriate. No duplicate class assignments for the same course code or content area. For all active class assignments and from and to dates are complete with no missing values. And again, those values are done in an appropriate and consistent date format. And you have to make sure that student enrollments are in no way duplicated. All of these kinds of issues are going to cause difficulty with seeing student classes or teachers in the visibility tool. So there's visibility tool help available on the LiveBinders site. And there's the link right there for the LiveBinders site. You'll notice that in the blue, you'll look up under visibility tool. That will open up those red bars beneath it, which will allow you to access those resources. All right, we're going to go ahead and move on and talk about paper testing. We are going to be using pre-ID labels for paper testing this year. As you'll notice, I'm guessing most of you are thinking exactly what the small fan is thinking, that you are just not a big fan of that. But let me explain why. Number one, pre-ID labels allow districts longer to get your SIS-EIS connection correct. As many of you know, the original date for this was January 31st. Because of using pre-ID labels, we've been able to push that out to the 15th and give you guys essentially another half a month to be able to get some of this done. Pre-ID labels also allow us to work with our vendor to get updated labels to districts, which is going to mean less bubbling. We are working with Questar to be able, hopefully, to do a delta poll to give you labels later in the process in order to make for less bubbling and less correcting down the line. Finally, pre-ID labels mean that the vendor has a less compressed printing time, and that means that your materials will be in the district 2 weeks before the testing window. And that means that your materials, which will be shipped to district offices, will arrive on the first week of April. Now, Assessment Logistics, our group, will be working with districts whose offices are closed for spring break that week, and now you can see that lovely unretouched photo of a primary testing coordinator once they get all their boxes in. I will note that the landing date for the materials originally is April 2nd. April 2nd is what we typically would call Easter Monday, because April 1st, weirdly enough, is April Fool's Day and Easter this year. So we're going to be working with districts to make sure that you're getting materials landing on April 3rd, as we realize that many of you will have offices closed that day. And again, you'll be hearing from us if you have spring break set for that week of April 2nd through April 6th. Let's take a look at some of the course codes we mentioned a moment ago. These are excerpts from the course code workbook that is available to you on LiveBinders, EdTools, and the Nextera admin site. This is showing you EOC codes and C codes for English, U.S. history, biology, and chemistry. There are notes you'll need to pay attention to. For example, that one in the upper right corner that talks about that A course codes are for the first section of a year-long course, so will not be pulled. So you'll pay attention to that as you're moving through things. There are also Cambridge courses. The IGSCE courses are pulled for TCAP assessment. There is another abbreviation for Cambridge courses which are not pulled for assessment, but if these are the ones that you have, these are the ones that you need to go ahead and put in, and then you see right there the required EOC tests that will have to be assessed. This is the grades 3 through 8 code for general education. These are the grades 2 through 8 comprehensive codes, which are in the visibility tool. Please note, comprehensive codes are for scheduling students with more severe disabilities who require a replacement of core content instruction. Those students will be taking the general education end of year assessment. If they are taking the alternative assessment, you're going to put them in the ALT course codes. There's grade 2, includes grade 2 ALT, and then the MSA and TCAP ALT codes, which should be used for any student taking the alternate assessments. There are retired codes. They are listed on that document. I did not put them in the PowerPoint, but each page of that document has the active codes at the top of the page and the retired codes at the bottom of the page, and they are marked as retired codes. Please note, if you put students in retired codes, they will not show in the visibility tool. We are not pulling retired codes for assessment. So some particular course code issues. One, we've had issues with duplicates. Those primarily exist at grades 3 through 8 English language arts. And so TDOE, our folks in IT, have programmatically removed duplicates from the visibility tool. So what caused this is scheduling students in multiple instances with the same course code resulted in multiple classes being pulled into the visibility tool. So here's the logic that IT used for resolving those disputes. If it was the same teacher, they chose the lowest local class number. If it was different teachers, they chose the teacher with the most time with the student in the content area. If there was an equal amount of time between different teachers, then they chose the teacher with the lowest numbered teacher license number. So there are also other problems that have come up. Students registered in the same content in multiple grade levels. That was treated programmatically by the visibility tool as a duplicate and was resolved to the student assigned grade. If you are struggling with this issue and you suddenly find a student reassigned with this, make sure that, for example, if you have a 7th grade student who is taking 8th grade math, that you have them just in 8th grade math and not assigned to a 7th grade math course as well. They will be programmatically sent back to 7th grade, quote unquote, and we don't want to do that. We want them in the proper class that you have them set up for. When students are moved, districts, schools, or classes, that class end date needs to be updated in the SIT, and then an extract must be sent to EIS. Special issues. Number 1 is alternative schools. Transferring to an alternative school is not considered a break in continuous enrollment at the remanding school. If they would have been coded as continuously enrolled, had they not transferred, they will still be continuously enrolled there. Students who are enrolled in alternative schools during the 2017-18 TCAP assessment can be tested either at their alternative school or at their school of remand or base school. So if they test at the alternative school, the school of remand is responsible for doing the following things. First, they have to make sure that the secure browser is downloaded onto student devices at the alternative school. They also need to provide the test administrator proctor scripts to the applicable test administrators at the alternative school, and they need to provide the required student login credentials to the test administrators at the alternative school. A proctor login is not required by the alternative school in order to administer the online test. All students remanded to alternative schools must have primary enrollments in the sending school per state law and state board policy. And there's an exception to that. Alternative schools in Tennessee is recognized in law as a school that accepts only remands. So they have an alternative school classification in the SDE or school directory. Any school that serves both remands and opt-ins is not an alternative school according to state law. They're not officially recognized in state law, but they do exist in a lot of the districts. And most of these schools in SDE have a classification of hybrid non-traditional. In those situations, if a student is remanded to that school, they must have a primary enrollment in their sending school. If they opted into that school, they should have a primary enrollment in the hybrid non-traditional school itself. What you see right there is the state law about alternative schools. I want to make sure that you see this is where we're headed and this is what we're doing as we're trying to follow this process. We know this is going to be a change for some of you, particularly those of you who have alternative schools with school numbers. Those of you with alternative schools that do not have a school number, this is not going to be an issue because your students are going to have remained at the remanding school. But for those of you with alternative schools with school numbers, we do realize this is going to be an issue. And again, both we at Assessment Logistics and the EIS Help Desk will work with you to talk through all of these issues. So homebound students, a homebound student information system record remains at the School of Remand. You can use a secondary or service enrollment in homebound if you want to track that as 975, 0975. You do not have to do that because that student is remaining with their primary enrollment with you. Homeschool students are going to be hand-entered for EOC and 5.8 if you are testing online, manually into Nextera by the building testing coordinator on the first day of the assessment window. Building testing coordinators have to register those students into the homeschool code so that those students will not show up on their school reporting. I want to remind you that that's also true for paper, that when you fill out paper, you're going to want to make sure that the school code that you put on that paper test document is 0981. If you put them under your system number, correct, but you put them under your school number, those homeschool students will end up under your reporting. And obviously, that's not what you want to do. You want to report them individually. So some other special circumstances, night schools, virtual schools, other special programs. If those students have a primary enrollment, they need to be treated like the alternative school scenario. They should be scheduled with a primary and secondary enrollment and then should be scheduled for the course in the SIS to load into EIS and then into Nextera. If you do have charter schools in your district, we want to just encourage that you confirm their testing plans for spring. That includes paper pencil, opting in, all of the pieces that go with that, making sure that they are ready to go. Finally, we have an odd situation with the U.S. History statewide dual credit pilot. Those courses have the exact same course code as the U.S. History EOC, so they have been pulled as an enrollment to take the EOC for U.S. History. However, that dual credit pilot means they do not take the EOC. So what you're going to do is once the administration window opens, you'll mark those students as not scheduled under test status, not testing in Nextera. And that flag will exclude them from participation rate calculations, and you will not need to go ahead and test them on the EOC then. All right, I want to just make a couple of quick reminders. So first, you got to remember you've got your resources. We've been talking about them all along. You have live binders. You have the tnready.gov site. You have the EdTools training resources, and you have the Nextera Help tab. All of these give you lots of places to find information or to share information with others. One of the advantages of the Live Binders site is it's easy to share with building testing coordinators and test administrators. I also want to make sure that you plan to join us for the Regional Roadshow. That's the last week of February, February 26th through March 2nd. We will be on the road all 5 days. We're at the normal places, Knoxville, Cookeville, Nashville, Jackson. That's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And on Friday, we will be in Memphis as well. And so we'd love to have you join us. You can register. If you have any questions about that, please send an email to tined.assessment@tn.gov. Also want to let you know that one of the things we were very successful with during the fall were daily webinars throughout the testing window. In cooperation with Questar and the department put on a webinar each afternoon at 3:30 Central Time. We're going to be doing that again. They last about 30 minutes. They include time for questions from the field, and we got very positive feedback about that. It enabled us to get information out to districts when we had some problems with Google and Chromebooks, and to quickly get that information disseminated to folks. It allowed us to shore up some areas that we were a little concerned about and making sure that we were clear. And then it let folks feedback to us and Questar to quickly respond to some issues as they arose.